Despite cautions from his peers, a millionaire employs a woman surrounded by rumors. As he gets to know her, startling discoveries emerge that not only vindicate his decision, but also reveal deeper mysteries. And if you cherish your family and love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and avoid 10 years of bad luck. The evening sun cast long shadows across Harrison Mills' expansive estate as luxury vehicles pulled into the circular driveway. Harrison adjusted his designer tie in the hallway mirror, preparing to welcome his weekly dinner guests. At 42, he had built his fortune in tech startups, but success had left him feeling increasingly isolated in his 20-room mansion. The first to arrive was James Peterson, a fellow entrepreneur and longtime friend, followed by Sarah Chun, a prominent real estate developer, and Michael Roberts, a venture capitalist. They gathered in the main living room, where crystal glasses filled with aged scotch reflected the warm lighting from the modern chandelier above. "Have you heard about your new housekeeper's background?" James asked, swirling his drink. His voice carried a note of concern that made Harrison pause. "There are some concerning rumors circulating in town." Sarah leaned forward in her Italian leather armchair. "I heard she worked for the Blackwells before this. They fired her under mysterious circumstances." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "No one knows exactly what happened, but there was talk of missing jewelry." Harrison maintained his composed expression, though his interest was piqued. He had hired Tasha Williams through a prestigious staffing agency 2 weeks ago, and so far, her work had been impeccable. "I prefer to judge people by their actions, not rumors," he replied firmly. Michael shook his head. "That's admirable, Harrison, but naive. Someone in your position can't afford to be careless about who you let into your home. Have you done a thorough background check?" The conversation was interrupted by the sound of efficient movement in the kitchen. Through the open door, Harrison observed Tasha working. Her movements were precise and confident as she prepared dinner, her dark hair neatly tied back, her uniform pristine. She moved with grace between the industrial-grade appliances, checking multiple dishes simultaneously. Despite his guests' warnings, Harrison found himself drawn to the kitchen. He excused himself and walked over, ostensibly to check on dinner's progress. The aromas of perfectly seasoned dishes filled the air. Tasha was plating an appetizer of seared scallops with a delicate sauce, her focus unwavering. She handled the expensive ingredients with expertise, showing no signs of the nervousness one might expect from someone with something to hide. Harrison watched as she garnished each plate with microscopic precision, her movements speaking of years of professional training. The rumors didn't align with what he observed. How could someone supposedly untrustworthy display such dedication to their craft? He noticed small details, her organized workstation, the careful way she handled his expensive kitchen equipment, her methodical approach to timing each dish. The whispers from the living room carried faintly into the kitchen, and Harrison saw a slight tightening around Tasha's eyes. She clearly heard the gossip, yet she continued her work with unwavering focus. When she turned and caught him watching, she didn't flinch or look away. Instead, she met his gaze directly and offered a confident smile that seemed to challenge the very rumors being spread about her. "Dinner will be ready in 5 minutes, Mr. Mills," she said, her voice steady and professional. "Would you like me to serve the appetizers now?" Harrison nodded, studying her composed demeanor. There was intelligence in her eyes and dignity in her bearing that contradicted the image his friends were painting. "Yes, please," he replied, then added, "everything else." "Okay, excellent, Tasha." Her smile widened slightly, but she remained professional. "Thank you, sir. I take pride in my work." The statement was simple, but carried weight, as if responding not just to his compliment, but to the undercurrent of suspicion from the other room. As she arranged the appetizers on a serving tray, Harrison noticed a small scar on her right hand, barely visible. It hinted at a story, at experiences that had shaped her. The mystery surrounding her past didn't frighten him. Instead, it intrigued him. In his experience, the most interesting people often carried the most complex histories. A few days after the dinner party, Harrison found himself working from his home office, distracted by the aromas wafting from the kitchen. His curiosity finally got the better of him, and he decided to take a break. Walking into the kitchen, He found Tasha experimenting with what appeared to be a complex sauce reduction. "Something smells incredible," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Is this for dinner?" Tasha looked up from her work, adjusting the heat under the pan with practiced precision. "Actually, I'm testing a recipe. I hope you don't mind me using the kitchen during my break." Her tone was professional, but carried a hint of passion when discussing the dish. "Not at all. Tell me about what you're making," Harrison replied, genuinely interested. He'd noticed that all her meals showed sophisticated technique that went beyond typical household cooking. "It's a modern take on a classic French sauce, but with Japanese influences," she explained, adding a precisely measured amount of sake to the reduction. "I've been developing this recipe for years. The trick is balancing the umami with the traditional French base." As she spoke about cooking, her usual reserved demeanor softened. "I studied at Le Cordon Bleu for a year before." She paused, then continued carefully, "Before circumstances required me to take a different path. Opening my own restaurant has always been the dream, though." Harrison watched as she plated a small portion for tasting. Her technique was flawless, each movement efficient and purposeful. "Why haven't you pursued that dream?" he asked, noting how her expression changed slightly at the question. "Dreams require capital, Mr. Mills, and reputation." She offered him a taste of the sauce, especially in the restaurant business. The flavors were extraordinary, complex layers that revealed themselves gradually, demonstrating both technical skill and creative vision. Harrison, who had dined at some of the world's finest restaurants, was impressed. "The annual charity gala for the Children's Hospital is coming up," he said after a moment of consideration. "I'm on the planning committee, and we're still looking for catering. Would you be interested in taking it on?" Tasha's hand paused over the stove. "The gala? That's a major society event." Her voice carried a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Are you sure you want to trust me with something that important?" "I trust what I've tasted and what I've observed," Harrison replied firmly. "Your work speaks for itself." The guest list includes several restaurant investors and critics. It could be an opportunity to showcase your talents. She was quiet for a moment, wiping her hands on her apron as she considered the offer. The people who attend these events, they tend to have certain expectations about who belongs there. Her words were careful, measured, and they talk. "Let them talk," Harrison said, surprising himself with his defensiveness. Sometimes the best way to silence rumors is to prove them wrong through actions. Tasha's expression shifted from uncertainty to determination. "When is the gala?" 3 weeks from Saturday. "We're expecting about 200 guests." Harrison watched her mentally calculating logistics, already planning. "You'll have full access to the kitchen and whatever staff you need." "Menu Puerto Rico." "Opposal," she said, already reaching for a notebook. "And we should discuss dietary restrictions, service style, timing." Her professional training was evident as she quickly listed considerations. "I have complete confidence in you," Harrison said, noting how her eyes lit up as she began sketching out ideas. "Though I admit, I have a selfish motive. I'm tired of the same predictable catering these events always have." A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Mr. Mills, I can promise you one thing. My food is never predictable." As Harrison left the kitchen, he found himself looking forward to the gala with an enthusiasm he hadn't felt for such events in years. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that by putting Tasha in the spotlight, he might be setting in motion events that would change both their lives in ways he couldn't predict. That evening, he noticed her working late, surrounded by cookbooks and notes, completely absorbed in her planning. The sight of her so focused, so passionate about her craft, made him question everything his friends had warned him about. Whatever secrets she held, Harrison was becoming increasingly certain that they weren't what everyone assumed. The night of the charity gala transformed the Mills estate into a showcase of elegance and culinary artistry. The kitchen hummed with controlled chaos as Tasha directed her temporary staff with the precision of a seasoned commander. She had spent weeks planning every detail, and now the moment of truth had arrived. Among the guests was Anton Reeves, one of the most influential food critics on the East Coast, known for ending careers with a single review. His unexpected presence added an extra layer of pressure to the evening. Harrison noticed him immediately. A tall, thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who carried a small notebook and studied each plate with surgical intensity. The first course emerged from the kitchen, a deconstructed seafood bisque that challenged traditional presentations while honoring classical techniques. Harrison watched as servers delivered the dishes with choreographed efficiency, each plate a mirror image of perfection. The dining room fell into that particular hush that occurs when food transcends mere sustenance to become art. "Extraordinary," murmured Mrs. Bradford, a notorious social critic who rarely offered praise. "Who did you say prepared this?" She held her spoon aloft, examining the play of light through the crystalline consommé. Before Harrison could respond, Anton Reeves interrupted. "The technique here is remarkable. This is clearly someone with classical training." He made a note in his small book, though there's an innovative edge that suggests a more contemporary influence. Course after course emerged, each one generating more buzz among the guests. Tasha's menu told a story, one that blended tradition with daring creativity. A dish of perfectly seared duck breast came accompanied by a sauce that incorporated unexpected Japanese elements, calling back to the experiment Harrison had witnessed weeks earlier. From his position near the kitchen doors, Harrison could see Tasha working. Despite the pressure, she moved with calm authority, tasting, adjusting, inspecting each plate before it left her domain. She had transformed from his housekeeper into something else entirely, an artist in her element. The whispers that had once carried rumors now carried praise. Harrison overheard fragments of conversation. Trained in France, apparently, and such sophisticated flavor profiles, even those who had been most vocal about their doubts found themselves won over by the undeniable evidence of her talent. Anton Reeves became increasingly animated as the meal progressed, breaking his usual stoic demeanor. During the main course, a perfectly executed beef tenderloin with a revolutionary mushroom preparation, he actually stood up to get a better look at the plating. "This is not merely good cooking," he declared to his table companions. "This is someone pushing the boundaries of modern cuisine while displaying a profound respect for foundational techniques. I must speak with the chef." The dessert course provided the finale Tasha had been building toward, a chocolate creation that combined French patisserie skills with architectural precision. As servers presented the dishes, an audible gasp rippled through the room. The dessert wasn't just food, it was a statement of capability and vision. Harrison seized the moment to make his way to the kitchen. He found Tasha checking the last few dessert plates, her chef's coat still pristine despite hours of work. "They're asking about you out there," he said softly, particularly Anton Reeves. Tasha's hands stilled over the plate she was inspecting. "Anton Reeves?" A mix of emotions crossed her face. Hope, fear, determination. "I didn't know he would be here." "Go out there," Harrison encouraged. "You've earned this moment." She hesitated, then squared her shoulders and nodded. As she emerged from the kitchen, the confidence she displayed while cooking seemed to waver slightly in the face of the social scrutiny she was about to encounter. Anton Reeves approached her immediately. "Extraordinary work," he said, extending his hand. "Your sauce work is particularly impressive. The way you've integrated Eastern influences while maintaining classical integrity. Where did you train?" As Tasha began to explain her background, Harrison noticed something shift in the room. The social elite who had once whispered behind their hands about her mysterious past now leaned in to hear her speak about technique and inspiration. Her knowledge and passion were undeniable, and in that moment, her cooking had given her a voice that commanded respect. The critic spent nearly 20 minutes discussing various courses with her, his notebook forgotten as he engaged in an animated conversation about her vision for modern cuisine. "You should be running your own kitchen," he said finally, his tone carrying the weight of someone whose opinions shaped careers. "This level of talent deserves a proper showcase." The day after the gala, Harrison found Tasha in the kitchen, methodically cleaning and organizing despite having worked late into the night. The morning light streamed through the windows, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes, evidence of her dedication to perfection at the event. "I have a proposition for you," Harrison said, setting down his coffee cup. He had spent most of the night thinking about this, inspired by both the success of the gala and the obvious impact it had made on the community. What if we could help other talented people who haven't had the right opportunities? Tasha paused her work, giving him her full attention. What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Mills? A culinary education program for underprivileged youth, he explained, warming to the topic. Combined with a restaurant where they can train, we could provide scholarships, apprenticeships, real-world experience. Your story last night touched people, Tasha. It made them realize that talent doesn't always have the luxury of following a traditional path. Her expression shifted through several emotions: interest, excitement, and then something that looked like fear. That's an ambitious project, she said carefully, resuming her cleaning with more intensity than necessary. You would be perfect to lead it, Harrison continued. You have the skills, the vision, and most importantly, you understand what these kids might be going through. The foundation could— I can't, Tasha interrupted, her voice sharp. She set down the cleaning cloth and gripped the edge of the counter. I'm sorry, but I can't be the face of something like that. People will ask questions. They'll want to know more about my background, my credentials. She shook her head. It's better if I stay in the background. Have this on studie. D her for a moment. You're afraid, he observed, not unkindly. But I saw you last night. I saw how you came alive sharing your knowledge with the staff. How naturally you took charge. Why are you holding yourself back? Tasha's knuckles whitened against the counter. You don't understand. In this world, your world, reputation is everything. One mistake, one skeleton in the closet, and everything crumbles. I've seen it happen. Then help me understand, Harrison said, moving closer. Because what I understand is that last night, one of the most respected critics in the industry said you should be running your own kitchen. What I understand is that you have a gift that could change lives. And what happens when they discover that I'm not what they think I am? Her voice trembled slightly. When they find out that I'm— She caught herself, taking a deep breath. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Mills, but I can't risk it. Harrison leaned against the counter, considering his next words carefully. When I started my first company, everyone said I was too young, too inexperienced. I had dropped out of college, a fact that many people took great pleasure in pointing out. But you know what? Those doubts, those whispers, they pushed me to work harder, to prove them wrong. He noticed Tasha's posture softening slightly as he spoke. My background isn't as polished as people assume. I made mistakes, took shortcuts I'm not proud of, but I learned from them. And now I have the opportunity to help others avoid those same struggles. It's different, Tasha insisted, but with less conviction. Is it? Harrison challenged gently. We all have parts of our past we wish we could change. But it's what we do with our present that matters. Think about the kids who could benefit from this. Kids who might be standing where you once stood, needing someone to believe in them. Tasha was quiet for a long moment, and Harrison could almost see the internal battle playing out behind her eyes. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I would need to do it my way. No compromises on the training standards, no cutting corners to please donors. Of course, Harrison agreed quickly, hope rising in his chest. We would set it up as a proper foundation. Everything legitimate, everything transparent. He paused, then added, whatever you're afraid of, Tasha, we can face it together. I'm not just offering you a job, I'm offering you a partnership. She looked at him, then really looked at him, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Why are you doing this? Why take the risk? Because talent like yours shouldn't be hidden away in a private kitchen. Because every person deserves a second chance or a first one. And because— He smiled slightly. I've learned to trust my instincts about people. The following week, Harrison and Tasha sat in his study, surrounded by preliminary plans for the foundation. The evening had grown late, and the formal barriers between employer and employee had softened with the hours of collaborative work. A half-empty bottle of wine sat between them, and Tasha's usually perfect posture had relaxed slightly. Tell me about where you learned to cook, Harrison said, setting aside a draft of the foundation's mission statement. He had been careful not to push for personal information, but something about the moment felt right for truth. Tasha swirled the wine in her glass, staring into it, as if reading memories in its depths. My earliest memories are of a kitchen, not a fancy one like yours, but a small apartment kitchen in Queens. My mother worked 3 jobs, so I spent most of my time with my grandmother. She smiled faintly at the memory. Grandma Rosa couldn't afford toys or games, but she could teach me about food. She had worked in restaurant kitchens all her life, starting as a dishwasher and working her way up to line cook. She taught me that cooking was about respect for the ingredients, for the techniques, for the people you're feeding. Harrison watched as her professional facade began to crack, revealing glimpses of the person beneath. She sounds remarkable. She was, Tasha agreed, her voice softening. When she got sick, I was 12. Medical bills ate through every penny we had. My mother, she paused, taking a steadying breath. My mother had to make choices no parent should have to make. Food or medicine, rent or treatments. The silence hung heavy in the room. Harrison wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but he sensed she needed to continue. I started working in kitchens at 14, lying about my age. Dishwashing, prep work, anything to help with money. Some of the chefs noticed I had skill, taught me things when they could, but formal training? That was a dream that seemed impossible. She stood up abruptly, moving to the window. Then I got lucky. A chef took me under his wing, helped me get a scholarship to Le Cordon Bleu. It was like a fairy tale, the poor girl from Queens getting her shot at the big time. Her laugh held no humor. But fairy tales aren't real, are they? What happened? Harrison asked quietly. Life happened. Halfway through my training, Grandma Rose's condition worsened. The scholarship covered tuition, but not living expenses. She hesitated, her reflection in the window looking haunted. I made choices, desperate choices, the kind that follow you, no matter how far you run. Harrison stood, joining her at the window. We all have moments we're not proud of, Tasha. Actions taken when our backs were against the wall. She turned to face him, her eyes fierce. Do you know what it's like to have your dreams within reach, only to watch them slip away? To know that no matter how hard you work, no matter how good you are, one mistake from your past can erase everything. Is that why you've been working as a housekeeper? Hiding your talent? Tasha nodded slowly. It's safer. No one looks too closely at the help. No one questions your background. You just fade into the background. She laughed bitterly. Until someone like you comes along and makes me dream again. Harrison considered his next words carefully. The foundation we're planning, it could help prevent others from facing those same impossible choices. We could create scholarships that cover more than just tuition, provide real support systems. You make it sound so simple, she said, but there was longing in her voice. It won't be simple, Harrison admitted, but nothing worthwhile ever is. And Tasha, he waited until she met his gaze. Whatever choices you made, whatever you're running from, I meant what I said about facing it together. Something in her expression shifted, a mixture of hope and fear that made her look younger, more vulnerable. I've spent so long protecting myself, building walls. I'm not sure I know how to stop. Then we'll start small, Harrison suggested. The foundation needs a detailed proposal. Focus on that, on how we can help others avoid the path you had to take. Let's create something positive from the pain. Tasha returned to the desk, picking up the mission statement they'd been working on. A second chance, she murmured, running her finger along the words. Not just for the students, but maybe for everyone involved, Harrison finished softly. They worked late into the night, turning Tasha's experiences into a framework for change. With each detail she shared, each memory, she transformed into a potential solution for others. The weight she carried seemed to lighten slightly, and Harrison found himself increasingly drawn not just to her talent or her determination, but to her capacity for turning personal tragedy into hope for others. The announcement of the Mills-Williams Culinary Foundation made waves in the local community, though not the kind Harrison had anticipated. He sat in his regular booth at the Sterling Club, a private establishment where the city's elite gathered. Here, listening to Charles Wellington III, chairman of the city's Business Development Council, voice his concerns. Really, Harrison, you must see how this looks, Charles said, cutting into his steak with practiced precision. Opening our most prestigious culinary circles to just anyone. It devalues the entire profession. Harrison set down his fork, his appetite diminishing. These are talented young people who deserve a chance, Charles. The same chance your family had generations ago. That's hardly the same thing. Margaret Whitmore, a prominent restaurant owner, chimed in from the adjacent table. We're talking about bringing in individuals from questionable backgrounds. Have you considered the liability? The potential impact on our reputation as a dining destination? Not to mention, Charles added, lowering his voice conspiratorially, your choice of partner in this venture. We've all heard rumors about your housekeeper's past. Is it wise to stake your reputation on someone so uncertain? Harrison felt his jaw tighten. 6 months ago, he might have nodded along, might have prioritized maintaining his social standing over doing what was right. But working with Tasha, seeing her passion for teaching during their planning sessions, had shifted something fundamental in his worldview. Let me be clear, Harrison said, his voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby tables. Tasha Williams is one of the most talented chefs I've ever met. Her background, whatever it may be, has given her insights into exactly what these young people need to succeed. Oh, Harrison, Margaret sighed, as if speaking to a naive child. You've always had a soft heart. But this isn't about charity. This is about maintaining standards, about protecting our community's reputation. Standards? Harrison felt heat rising in his chest. Like the standards that keep talented people out of kitchens because they can't afford proper training? Or the standards that judge people based on rumors rather than their abilities? Charles leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. We've heard things, Harrison, about false credentials, about theft. Do you really want to risk everything you've built on someone like that? Harrison stood, dropping his napkin on the table. Someone like what, Charles? Someone who had to fight for every opportunity? Someone who understands what it means to have real passion for their craft. He reached for his wallet, pulling out several bills. You know what I've noticed? The people most concerned with protecting their status are often the ones who've never had to earn it. The silence that fell over the nearby tables was heavy with tension. Harrison had just broken one of the cardinal rules of their social circle. Never air disagreements publicly. You're making a mistake, Margaret called after him as he headed for the door. This foundation of yours will never get the support it needs. Not in this city. Harrison paused at the door, turning back to face the room. Then maybe it's time this city changed. He drove home in a state of simmering anger, but also with a growing sense of purpose. The opposition he'd faced only reinforced the importance of what they were trying to achieve. He found Tasha in the kitchen, as usual, testing recipes for their first training program. The sight of her focused concentration, the way she methodically worked to perfect each dish, calmed his agitation. Rough lunch, she asked, not looking up from her work, but somehow sensing his mood. Let's just say our project has some vocal opponents, he replied, loosening his tie. Apparently, some people think helping talented young chefs is going to bring about the downfall of civilization. Tasha's hands stilled over the herbs she was chopping. Because of me? Her voice was quiet, controlled. Because they're afraid of change, Harrison corrected firmly. Because they'd rather protect their exclusive little world than open doors for others. He moved closer, watching her precise knife work resume. But you know what? Their opposition just convinced me we're doing exactly what needs to be done. She looked up then, studying his face. You're really willing to fight them on this? To risk your position in their world? Their world needs shaking up, he said simply. Besides, I've made my fortune by recognizing potential others missed. And this. He gestured to her work, to the detailed training plan spread across the counter. This has more potential than anything I've seen in years. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Even with a partner with a questionable past, especially with you as a partner. The words came out more intensely than he'd intended, and something shifted in the air between them. As summer turned to fall, the Mills-Williams Culinary Foundation began taking shape despite constant opposition. Harrison and Tasha sat in what had once been his formal dining room, now converted into a meeting space, reviewing the latest setback. Another vendor pulled out, Tasha said, sliding a cancellation email across the table. They claim they're overbooked, but we both know what's really happening. Harrison scanned the email, noting it was the third supplier to back out in 2 weeks. They're being pressured, Margaret Whitmore's restaurant group has significant influence over local suppliers. We can't train students without proper ingredients, Tasha said, frustration evident in her voice. And the rumors. She pushed a local society magazine toward him, open to a particularly vicious gossip column that questioned both the foundation's legitimacy and Tasha's credentials. Harrison had already seen the article. The allegations were carefully worded to avoid legal issues while maximizing damage. "We need to change tactics," he said, standing to pace the room. "They're fighting us with whispers and backdoor deals. We need to make this public, force them into the open." Tasha looked up from her laptop where she'd been searching for alternative suppliers. "What are you thinking?" "A showcase event. Something big enough to attract attention beyond our local circle. We'll invite food critics, journalists, potential donors from other cities. Make it impossible for them to ignore what we're trying to do. They'll try to sabotage it," Tasha warned, but he could see the idea taking hold in her mind, like they did with the supplier contracts. "Then we'll be ready." Harrison pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. "I still have connections outside the local restaurant scene. People who owe me favors. We can bring in supplies from other cities if necessary." Tasha stood, moving to the planning board they'd installed on one wall. "We could structure it as a multi-course event, telling the story of why this foundation matters." Her voice grew animated as she worked through the concept, each course representing a different aspect of culinary education, showing what these kids could achieve with proper training. Harrison watched her work, admiring how she could transform setbacks into opportunities. "We could invite some of the young people who've already applied to the program. Let them share their stories. And demonstrate basic skills," Tasha added, making notes. "Show that talent exists, it just needs nurturing." She paused, pen hovering over the board. "But Harrison, an event like this, with national attention, they'll dig deeper into my background." He moved to stand beside her at the board. "Then let them dig. Whatever they find, we'll face it together. This is bigger than either of us now." They spent the next 3 weeks planning every detail. Harrison leveraged his business contacts to secure supplies from sources beyond local influence. Tasha worked with potential students, identifying those ready to participate and helping them prepare their presentations. The sabotage attempts began almost immediately. Why? False stories appeared in local media questioning the foundation's financial structure. Health inspectors suddenly became intensely interested in Harrison's property. Anonymous tips led to investigations into potential code violations. But for every obstacle, they found a solution. When local venues mysteriously became unavailable, Harrison arranged to host the event in his own home. When traditional caterers refused to provide staff, they recruited culinary students from neighboring cities. "They're getting desperate," Harrison observed one evening, reviewing another threatening letter from Charles Wellington's law firm. "All these attacks, and they still haven't found anything substantial enough to stop us." Tasha looked up from where she was training a group of potential students in knife skills. "Maybe not yet," she said quietly, "but they're getting closer." Harrison studied her expression. "You're worried about something specific." She dismissed the students for a break before responding. "There are things in my past, Harrison, things I haven't told you. If they come out during the event, then we'll deal with them," he said firmly. "Look at what you've already accomplished here." He gestured to the kitchen where young, eager faces were visible through the window, practicing the techniques she'd just taught them. "That's real. That's what matters." A small smile touched her lips as she watched her students. "When I was their age, all I wanted was a chance. One person to believe in me enough to teach me, to help me build a legitimate future. And now you're becoming that person for them," Harrison said softly. "Whatever comes out about your past, it doesn't change what you're doing here and now." The night of the showcase arrived with an energy that hummed through Harrison's transformed estate. The main hall gleamed with elegant lighting, while the expanded kitchen buzzed with focused activity. Food critics from major publications mingled with potential donors, and several prominent chefs had come to observe. Tasha moved through the kitchen like a conductor, guiding her students through their preparations with calm authority. The first 2 courses had been executed flawlessly, earning approving nods from even the most skeptical observers. Harrison watched from the doorway, feeling a surge of pride at how far they'd come. Then he noticed a disturbance at the entrance. A man he didn't recognize was arguing with the security team. Something about his desperate insistence caught Harrison's attention, and he moved closer to investigate. "Please, I need to speak with Tasha Williams," the man was saying. His clothes were expensive but rumpled, his manner agitated. "She needs to know I'm here. Tell her it's Marcus Chun." The name triggered something in Harrison's memory, a fragment of conversation, perhaps, or a detail from a background check. Before he could intervene, Tasha emerged from the kitchen to check on the timing of the next course. She froze when she saw Marcus, all color draining from her face. "Hello, Tasha," Marcus said softly. "It's been a while." The kitchen staff had stopped working, sensing the tension. Harrison moved closer to Tasha, noticing how her hands trembled slightly. "This isn't the time or place, Marcus," she managed, her voice barely steady. "When is the time?" Marcus stepped forward, ignoring the security guards. "When you've completely reinvented yourself. When you've fooled all these people into thinking you're something you're not." Harrison started to intervene, but Tasha held up a hand to stop him. Around them, guests were beginning to notice the confrontation, conversations dying as they turned to watch. "Whatever you're here to say," Tasha began, but Marcus cut her off. "They deserve to know the truth," he announced, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "About who you really are. About what really happened at Le Cordon Bleu." Margaret Whitmore materialized from the crowd, her expression triumphant. "Perhaps we should all hear what this gentleman has to say." Harrison watched Tasha's careful composure begin to crack. The students she'd been training looked confused, uncertain whether to continue their work or listen. "You're perfect chef here," Marcus continued, bitter amusement in his voice. "She did attend Le Cordon Bleu. That part's true. But she never graduated, did she, Tasha? Never completed the program. Because of what happened to the scholarship money." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Harrison saw Charles Wellington pull out his phone, no doubt already drafting a press release to destroy the foundation. "The scholarship fund for underprivileged students," Marcus went on, "had some interesting discrepancies that year. Money that was supposed to help multiple students somehow got redirected. And then you disappeared." "That's not what happened," Tasha said, her voice stronger now, anger replacing fear. "You don't know everything about that time." "I know enough," Marcus countered. "I know because I covered for you. I lost my position on the scholarship committee trying to hide what you'd done. And now here you are, running another scholarship program." The room erupted in murmurs. Harrison could see their months of work crumbling, could feel the donors already mentally withdrawing their support. But what struck him most was the expression on the faces of Tasha's students. Confusion giving way to disappointment. "Is it true?" one of them asked, a young woman named Sarah, who reminded Harrison of how Tasha must have been at that age. "Did you steal scholarship money?" Before Tasha could respond, Harrison stepped forward. "Whatever happened in the past," he began, but Tasha touched his arm. "No," she said quietly. "They deserve the truth. All of it." She squared her shoulders, facing the crowd that had gathered. "Yes, I was involved with missing scholarship funds, but it wasn't what you think. I was trying to save it," Marcus interrupted. "I've seen the records, the transfers, the fake documents. You're good at reinventing yourself, Tasha. I'll give you that. But you can't keep running forever." Security finally managed to remove Marcus, but the damage was done. Guests began making excuses to leave. Donors pulled out checkbooks to void promised contributions, and critics who had been praising the food moments earlier now wore expressions of practiced disdain. Harrison stood beside Tasha, watching their vision collapse around them. But something wasn't adding up. The woman he'd come to know over these months, her passion for teaching, her genuine desire to help others, none of that aligned with Marcus's accusations. "There's more to this story," he said quietly, so only she could hear. Tasha nodded, tears threatening, but held back by sheer will. "Much more. But now it might be too late." The morning after the showcase disaster, Harrison found Tasha in the kitchen, methodically packing her knives and personal belongings. The room felt hollow, the energy and promise of previous weeks replaced by a heavy silence. Half-finished prep work from the interrupted event still sat on counters, a stark reminder of how quickly dreams could shatter. "You're not leaving," Harrison said. It wasn't a question, but a statement. "I have to," Tasha replied without turning around. "The foundation is finished. By now, every major food publication will have picked up Marcus's accusations. The donors are gone. The students..." Her voice cracked slightly. "They'll never trust me again." Harrison moved to stand beside her at the counter. "Then help me understand. What really happened with that scholarship money?" Tasha's hands stilled over her knife roll. For a long moment, she stood silent, then finally turned to face him. "My grandmother was dying," she said softly. "The experimental treatment that might have saved her. It cost more than we could ever afford. The scholarship fund had more than enough to cover multiple students that year." "So you took the money for her treatment," Harrison finished. "No," Tasha said sharply, surprising him. "That's what everyone assumed, what Marcus believed. But I never touched that money." She took a deep breath. "My father did." Harrison felt pieces starting to click into place. "Your father?" "Jean-Michel Laurent," Tasha said, watching Harrison's face for recognition. "He was a rising star in the French culinary world 20 years ago. Then he disappeared, leaving behind a string of debts and broken promises." Harrison's mind raced. The name was familiar. A chef who had been celebrated for his innovative techniques before vanishing from the scene. "Laurent, but your name is Williams." "My mother's name. She changed both our names after he left. She wanted to protect me from his reputation." Tasha laughed bitterly. "He showed up at Le Cordon Bleu when he heard I'd gotten the scholarship. Said he wanted to make amends, to be a father. I believed him." "He took the scholarship money," Harrison said, understanding dawning. "He had access to the accounts through his old connections. By the time I realized what he'd done, he was gone again. Marcus, he was my mentor, the one who'd helped me get the scholarship. He thought I was involved, tried to cover it up to protect me. It destroyed his career. Why didn't you tell anyone the truth? Who would believe me? The daughter of a notorious con man, claiming innocence? It was easier to disappear, to start over." She gestured around the kitchen, to hide in plain sight, using the skills without claiming the credentials. Harrison absorbed this information, his business mind already working through implications. "We can fix this," he said finally. "How?" Tasha demanded. "The damage is done. Even if people believe the truth now, who would trust their children's futures to someone with my background?" "Because your background is exactly what makes you perfect for this," Harrison insisted. "You understand better than anyone how people can be victimized, how dreams can be stolen. That's why you've been so passionate about protecting these students, about making sure every dollar is accounted for." Tasha shook her head, but Harrison could see uncertainty replacing resignation in her eyes. "The donors need to hear the whole story," Harrison interrupted. "Not just Marcus's version, but everything. About your father, about why you're so committed to doing this right." He reached for his phone. "And I think I know how to prove it." "What are you doing?" "Calling in some favors. There's always a paper trail, Tasha. If your father took that money, there's evidence somewhere. Give me 24 hours before you decide to leave." "Why?" she asked, and the question seemed to encompass more than just his request for time. "Why are you still fighting for this?" "For me?" Harrison paused in his dialing, looking at her directly. "Because in all these months, through every challenge and setback, you've never once thought about giving up, until now. Because I've seen how you are with those students, how you're trying to give them what was taken from you. And because..." He hesitated, then continued more softly, "because somewhere along the way, this stopped being just about the foundation for me." Understanding passed between them, acknowledgement of feelings that had grown alongside their shared mission. Tasha turned back to her partially packed belongings, then slowly began unpacking them. 24 hours, she agreed quietly. "But Harrison, if we do this, if we tell the whole truth, there's no going back. Every dark corner of my past, every painful detail, it all comes out. Then we'll face it together," he said firmly. "And we'll show them that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from our deepest wounds." The emergency board meeting of the Mills-Williams Foundation was called to order in Harrison's study. Present were the remaining board members, key donors, Marcus Chun, and several prominent food critics who had attended the showcase. Charles Wellington and Margaret Whitmore sat smugly near the front, clearly expecting to witness the foundation's final moments. Harrison stood at the head of the table, his laptop connected to the room's display screen. Tasha sat quietly beside him, her posture straight but tense. The room hummed with anticipation. "Before we vote on the foundation's future," Harrison began, "there are some facts you need to see." He clicked a button, and financial records filled the screen. These are the complete transaction records from Le Cordon Bleu Scholarship Fund, dated 20 years ago. Marcus leaned forward, frowning. "We've seen these. They show clear evidence of—" "Keep watching," Harrison interrupted. He clicked again, and new documents appeared. These were buried in old bank records. It took some doing to find them, but money always leaves a trail. The room fell silent as people began reading. Wire transfers, account numbers, signatures, all pointing to a different story than the one they believed. "Jean-Michel Laurent," Harrison announced, watching recognition dawn on several faces. One of the most innovative chefs of his generation, and also one of its greatest frauds. He disappeared 20 years ago after systematically stealing from restaurants and cooking schools across Europe. Tasha stood, her voice steady. "He was also my father, a fact I've spent my life trying to hide." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Harrison continued, bringing up more documents. The scholarship money was indeed stolen, but not by Tasha. By Laurent, using old connections and forged documents. He disappeared with the funds, leaving his daughter to take the blame. Marcus Chan had gone pale, staring at the evidence. "But why didn't you tell me?" he asked Tasha. "I was trying to help you. Would you have believed me?" Tasha asked quietly. "The daughter of a notorious con man? Claiming innocence? I'd seen how my father charmed people, made them believe his lies. It was easier to disappear than fight a battle I couldn't win." Harrison clicked again, and a new image appeared. A recent police report. Laurent was arrested last month in Montreal, attempting another scam. When my investigators questioned him, he confessed to the scholarship theft, clearing his daughter's name completely. Charles Wellington stood, straightening his tie. "This is all very dramatic, but it doesn't change the fact that Ms. Williams has been working under false pretenses, hiding her background." "No," Harrison cut him off sharply. "She's been using her background to protect others from experiencing the same pain. Every safeguard in our foundation structure, every protection for our students' funds, they came from her insistence on absolute transparency." Tasha stepped forward, addressing the room directly for the first time. "I was that scholarship student once, watching my dreams disappear because someone abused the system. Everything I've done here, every policy, every precaution, has been to ensure that never happens to another student." She turned to the young trainees who had insisted on attending. "I owe you an apology. Not for my past, but for not trusting you with the truth. I wanted to protect you, but in doing so, I denied you the most important lesson I could teach. That our past shapes us, but doesn't define us." The room was silent for a moment. Then Sarah, the young student from the showcase, stood up. "When I first came here," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "I thought I couldn't belong in this world because of where I came from. But Chef Williams," she saw past that. "She taught me that technique and passion matter more than pedigree." One by one, other students stood, sharing similar stories. As they spoke, Harrison watched the faces of the board members and donors begin to shift from skepticism to understanding. Marcus Chan finally rose. "I owe you an apology, Tasha. I let assumptions and prejudice blind me to the truth. Your father's actions cost me my position, but my own bias cost me the chance to help you when you needed it most." Margaret Whitmore's attempted intervention was cut short by an unexpected voice. Anton Reeves, the food critic who had been silently observing. "What I see here," he announced, "is not a scandal, but a story of redemption. A chef who turned personal tragedy into a mission to protect and nurture young talent. Isn't that exactly what this foundation claims to stand for?" Harrison looked at Tasha, seeing in her eyes the same mix of hope and determination that had first drawn him to her cause, and to her. "The choice is yours," he said to the room. "We can shut down this foundation, protect the status quo, or we can embrace a new vision of culinary education, one that understands that great talent can come from complicated places." The vote that followed was unanimous. As the room cleared, Harrison and Tasha remained, standing close together in the aftermath of truth finally spoken. "So," she said softly, "where do we go from here?" Harrison smiled, taking her hand. "Anywhere we want. After all, the best recipes are often created by those who aren't afraid to break with tradition."